I'd like to call our SBCAG meeting to order. Ms. Contreras, could you please call the roll?
Directors Carbajal? Here. Farr? Adam? Here. Levanino? Here. Bennett? Here. Lizaldi? Here. Mosby? Here. Clark? Here. White? Here. Patino? Here. Sierra? Here. Richardson? Here. And Chair Wolf.
Here. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. All right, our next item is the approval of the minutes from the January 21st, 2016 Board of Directors meeting. Do I have a motion to approve? So moved. Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. 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 Passes unanimously. Moving on to public comment, we have 2 speakers. If there's anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to us about an item that's not on the agenda, please submit a speaker slip right now, please. Our first speaker is Scott Wentz.
Good morning, Chair Wolf, members of the board. Scott Wentz representing Cars Are Basic. I gave you a cover letter and an inclusion discussing the issues of the Olive Mill Roundabout. In the last meeting, you had an update from the 101 widening people, and one of the issues was how well the Hot Springs Roundabout was working. And to quote Ms. Ayers, it was working very, very well. She should have talked to the people who live in Montecito. We saw the Montecito Planning Commission joint meeting with the Santa Barbara Planning Commission in the discussion of the Olive Mill Roundabout. And I was in amazement to watch the city of Santa Barbara get beat around by the Montecito Planning Commission people. They said just about everything that we had to say about the proposal for the Olive Mill Roundabout, as well as what we've had to say about the Hot Springs Roundabout. Now, you know, we have been proven correct multiple times over the years. And I could go through the list. We've been around for 18 years now. In June, we'll be starting our 19th year. We even get MTD, who's losing ridership, to agree with our observations on how to run the bus line. Sherry Fisher was very, very compliant with our suggestions. But you have to stop letting garbage in and garbage out. And that's what's going on. You have people that come and tell you, City of Santa Barbara will take, what, roundabouts are wonderful, we love them. Problem is, roundabouts are not ADA compliant, they're not bicycle friendly. To fix the problems of the Milpa Street roundabout, they built a $15 million underpass under the freeway. When all they had to do is take out the Milpas roundabout for $1 million and put in a standard intersection. These types of things have to stop. You have to stop being funnelers of money. It's like you have a snow shovel, dig in, shove the money over here because this organization wants it. If you can't prove it, then your staff should say, you may go ahead and approve a bike path. You may go ahead and approve a roundabout. But at the same time, we have no justification under statistical methods to prove it. That's part of the issue that's you're going to be asked to help fund the bicycle path in the city of Santa Barbara, the new bicycle master plan. They can't prove it. So I urge you, please, start changing your ways, stop being funnelers, and start being gatekeepers. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wentz. Our next speaker is Brian Robinson.
Hi, good morning, Chair Wolf, members of the board. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to speak. My name's Brian Robinson. I'm the former excuse me, co-chair of Yes on Measure A 2008. Kind of amazing to be here 8 years later on pretty much the eve of that historic election where 79, nearly 80% of the electorate in Santa Barbara County approved Measure A on the promise that we would be widening the freeway, and I think I speak for a lot of people in this community, when I thank you for your commitment and diligence to see that project move forward, in spite of a lot of the challenges and hard work that you guys have had to do. We felt that it would be appropriate on the eve of the Judge Angeli's, excuse me, ruling on the EIR to join you and support you and let the folks up at Caltrans and up in Sacramento know that this community is still committed to seeing that project move forward, and that we feel that the fixes and remedies to the EIR are fairly simple and should be made a priority and move forward as quickly as possible. So a group of us have drafted a letter. We've received over 100 signatures from members throughout the county requesting that Caltrans be expedient with their actions on the EIR. And so I wanted to present that to you today. I'm not gonna read it. We would encourage you, if you'd like, to join us in signing it. If this board would like to write a separate letter, we would encourage that. If there's anything that we can do to help this project get moved forward, you can reach out to us and lean on us. We're committed. This community is committed. The group of folks that have already signed on to this draft letter represent folks from Santa Maria to Carpinteria. We have about twice as many that are on this letter that are in the hopper waiting for approvals. You know, getting people to sign on and agree to the language of a letter is challenging, and everybody's spending a lot of hard time throughout the county to make that happen. So thank you very much. Have a great day.
All right, thank you, Mr. Robinson. Did you want to say anything, Mr. Dillon, about, well, first of all, regarding the request for us to write a letter? I'm assuming that will come back, would have to come back to the board at our next meeting.
Yeah, that could happen in March.
Okay.
And then we have been talking to Caltrans about the project and how it would go forward. Your board, we didn't announce it out of closed session because it was not a reportable action, but you decided last month to not appeal the ruling in favor of TFC. So in that respect, you know, we're supportive of taking the remand and going forward with the revisions. And of course, our role is to cooperate with Caltrans. Caltrans, at least at the staff level, sound very positive about moving forward with this expeditiously, but they still have to go through their process to get a formal decision, and the appeal period doesn't run until approximately sometime in March, late March. They have 60 days after entry of judgment to file an appeal. But I think our anticipation is that they will move forward aggressively to try to, you know, revise the EIR as needed and to, you know, recirculate it to the public for comment.
Okay. So the request for us to write a letter to ensure that they move expeditiously would be in order to come back at another meeting. Supervisor Carbajal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's what I was going to suggest. I was going to suggest that I think it's reasonable. I have heard, in light of the litigation, folks questioning Caltrans' commitment. I think they've, at the staff level, have been very supportive. But I think it never hurts to let Caltrans know of our resolve and our support for moving forward as expeditious as possible. So I think once we get that letter disseminated to us, it would be great if at our next future meeting we could consider a similar letter expressing that resolve and support for Caltrans moving forward.
All right, very good. We have no other public speakers, so we will now move on to the approval of the consent calendar. And I understand that Mr. Kemp on item 5A would like to pull that for a correction. And before you do that, let me just go down the line and see if we have other members who would like to pull an item. Mr. Lizalde, did you want to pull anything?
That's me.
Mr. Adam?
5C, please.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
5J.
5C, 5J. Anyone else?
5C. Same
Oh,
as
I'm
Peter.
sorry. Okay. All right, so we have, so far we have pulled item 5A, 5C, and 5J. Okay, let's move on to item 5A. Could you read that, please?
Certainly. 5A, measure a financial advisor. Authorize the chair to sign the contract with K&N Public Finance LLC to extend the term of the original contract to December 31st, 2016, at a cost not to exceed $12,634.
All right, Mr. Kemp?
Madam Chair and members, good morning. We would just request that the board delete this item from the agenda. There's some corrections that need to be made in the recommendation and in the contract language, so we can bring it back next month. So we would ask that you strike item 5A.
All right, can I have a motion to delete 5A?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Move on to 5C.
5C, 2015 Federal Transportation Improvement Program. Adopt Amendment Number 10 to the 2015 Federal Transportation Improvement Program, programming newly awarded highway safety improvement and state highway operation and protection program long lead projects.
All right, we'll start with Mr. Adam, and then we'll go to Ms. Sierra.
Okay, on Appendix 6A, I just have some nits to pick here. Just wait just a minute until everybody gets there. Are you looking at that, Mr. Kemp? Okay. So number 4 on the list there, where we're talking about the rumble strips on Black Road, between Black Road and West Main Street. I just want to go on record as saying the tractors that drive down that road will hate that, because we all drive down the side of the road, and the rumble strips are really nasty to drive over. I was going to ask you on the third one from the bottom, what is a road diet?
But we should all be.
Yeah, maybe we should all be on it.
I shouldn't say talking about everything, but I should be.
Oh.
Okay, what's a
Is
road
that-
diet?
Is that a typo or something, or is that, what is that?
Road diet. I'll take a shot at that one.
Alright.
They must be reducing the width of the road in that area.
Wow. Construct a central median.
This is the City of Santa Maria project using federal transportation funds administered by Caltrans, so we're a little bit of a disadvantage. I think they're reducing the width of the road there, perhaps as a traffic calming measure.
Would you like me to speak to that, Mr. Adam? It is, because it's 4-lane, and they're going to reduce it down to 1 lane, make the road narrower because we have people racing up and down there.
Oh,
So I knew that one.
road diet. Okay, that's a road diet. I like it.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, so my last issue here is the very last line says 29 Palms. It's kind of a nit, but, you know, that's not in our county.
Yeah.
I believe that project is actually in San Bernardino County, the SB. So we copied that over from a list of projects that we got from Caltrans incorrectly, so please strike that. Thank you for catching that.
Okay,
San
well, that'll-
Bernardino, not Santa Barbara.
That'll do something to your totals there, I'm sure.
Thank you for catching that, Mr. Adam. So it does
Somebody
change
reads it.
the totals. So I think,
Yes, we will, it would be the totals as revised. We will make those revisions before we send them in to Caltrans to make these funds available to the agencies. So
Okay,
we'll make
so-
those corrections.
I think what I would like, well, we'll hear from Ms. Sierra, and then let's do a separate motion on this one.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My question is, we're adding 3 new SHOP projects for the Highway Safety Improvement, HSIP, and State Highway Operation Protection Program, the SHOP program. We're adding 3 projects into this, and yet in our area, the most dangerous highway situation is the Lompoc Bridge, and that's totally bypassed here. I realize that that's a project coming up in the future, but why are we spending money on other projects when we could be putting that towards fixing the Lompoc Bridge, which is clearly a dangerous situation. I don't understand that.
Mr. Gibbons?
If I could. Thank you, Chair. Yes, the projects we have here that we identified as long lead, these have been identified for improvement. They will take a while. We know the fix. The Robinson Bridge that you're referring to, there have been studies on that. I think it may be coming back to this board soon. There have been studies. There's not yet agreement on what that fix is, whether it's the bridge itself, a separate pedestrian, and all that. There's a study that has a variety of options being looked at. I do not believe it is ready for programming yet, but it is not being ignored.
All right. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I have a question about the item just above the 29 Palms, four items above that to a Santa Barbara item. I believe I know what it's about, but I just appreciate confirmation that the intersections at Carpinteria and Voluntario, Almar and Puesta del Sol and La Cumbre and Callecita, are those to signalize those? Is that what that project is? That's, let's see, 1, 2,
It's
3,
fourth from- it's
4
fourth
up
from
from
the
the bottom
bottom.
on that 29, the legendary 29 Palms page. And I just wanted, I'm asking confirmation, is that to signalize those intersections? Is that what that project is?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but we could get an answer on that
Great.
if you wanted.
The amount of money seems like that might be possible. Great, I appreciate hearing back on that.
It might be good for the next time that this comes around to give more information on things like that. Because right above it, it does say signalized intersections. So we don't know what's going, as you point out, we don't know what's happening there. Okay, is there any other comments on this? Mr. Adam, would you like to make a motion on this item that deals with 29 Palms and a revision to the totals?
Okay, so we're going to adopt this item absent, well, absent the 29 Palms entry with revised totals.
Okay, is there a second to that? Second. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, all right, thank you. So now we will move to item J.
5J, Clean Air Express Saturday Service Pilot Program. Approve up to $14,000 in Measure A North County Interregional Transit Program funds to operate the service through June 30th, 2016.
Okay, and that was,
Yes, that was mine.
thank you. Mr.
I'm glad to see this on the agenda, and I'm suggesting that we approve it. But part of this this Saturday service is a two-way street. It's folks from Santa Barbara coming to the valley, and the valley visitors bureaus are supporting that with monetary contributions. But also, it's a two-way street. It's folks from the valley going into Santa Barbara to shop and to entertain themselves. So there's a sentence here in the packet that says additional funding will also be requested from the visitors bureaus and partners in the county to reduce the expense to Measure A program. What I'm asking publicly is that to ask the Santa Barbara South County Visitors Bureaus and other organizations to contribute to this fund to ensure that the Saturday service for Clean Air Express will continue running between Santa Barbara and the Santa Ynez Valley. Thank you.
All right, any other comments on item J?
I have a comment.
Thank you.
Chair Wolf. My big concern is that the Measure A doesn't cover the maintenance and the replacement of this service, and so that we just better be sure and better be careful how we spend that transit money and not come back and ask for more and not have the ability to pay for it.
It's a pilot study.
Mr. Adam, thank you.
I will say that the expectation that this, I think the expectation is the ridership will go up by four times, about right. I think that that's really a lot, and I think that somebody in the community better be ready to step up if it doesn't, because to have that continued on the basis of the subsidy that's going on is really
I've been reassured by the Solvang Visitors and Conference Bureau that they will be there to support the project till the end of at least to the end of the pilot period. So, and of course, the efforts were in gaining ridership by word of mouth and not a lot of advertising. And I think that we need to make the public aware that that service is available on Saturdays, two round trips a day. The fare is very reasonable, $7 each way, or a 10-trip ticket for $50. So it's a great thing. And folks that have ridden it, I can't say too much about it. They really enjoy the fact that they can come to the valley and visit us. And then the folks in the valley like coming into Santa Barbara. So we're just asking that the other visitors bureaus in the South County help us with the project. Thank you.
All right, any other comments on this item? All right, can I have a motion to approve the balance of the
So moved.
consent agenda? Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, we'll now move on to item 6, State Transportation Improvement Program.
Item 6, State Transportation Improvement Program. Receive update on revised fund estimate for 2016 State Transportation Improvement Program and provide direction to staff.
All right, Mr. Kemp, if you can begin and introduce this item.
Madam Chair, members, I'll just briefly set the context and then turn it over to Sarkis Kachek of our staff, who's going to give a presentation on this. The board has previously adopted a regional transportation improvement program, which it's required to do every 2 years, identifying projects that we want the state to fund out of our share of the state gas tax dollars. That was on the basis of a fund estimate that was more optimistic than what the current projections are. And the CTC recently took action to reduce the amount of funding that's going to be available for the 5-year STIP period by about $750 million. So they are on the lookout for projects around the state to eliminate from the STIP. This number is very large, as Sarkis will explain, and it's likely that every region in the state is going to be affected to some degree. We're here asking the board today for guidance and direction on the CTC's action and whether we want to recommend any projects to the commission for deletion. The situation, I can't characterize it any more accurately than say it's pretty dire. The amount of funding that's being collected from the state gasoline tax has been plummeting, and that's what's led to the situation that we're facing today. So with that bit of good news in the introduction, I'll turn it over to Sarkis.
All right, thank you. Sarkis?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Directors, so we've got a presentation today, and as Mr. Kim mentioned, this is a very dire situation. It's also a very dynamic situation, so we look forward to giving you information on this. So the issue at hand is, as Mr. Kim mentioned, is that the California Transportation Commission adopted a revised fund estimate for the 2016 STIP period, which covers fiscal years 16-17 to 2021. And this estimate shows that the California Transportation Commission is going to have to look at deleting $754 million of projects. And this is based on $2 billion of projects that are programmed in the STIP period. And so today, we're going to be presenting this to you and looking at how our projects will be potentially impacted by the CTC's action. Excuse me, and they are going to be looking to adopt the 2016 STIP at their May meeting. A little bit of background, we prepare a regional transportation improvement program every 2 years, and this is based on shares that our region gets based on a formula share. And historically, that number has been about $10 to $15 million. And the board policy is to program any STIP revenues towards the US 101 HOV widening project. As you can see in the corner over there, someone pumping gas in their car, and so that's just to illustrate that the revenues from the STIP come from when you go to the pump and buy gas. There's a current excise tax on fuel that's about, there used to be 18 cents, and this is the main fund source for the STIP. But I think everyone's been noticing that gas prices are going down, and because of that, the amount of revenue that the state can collect for the STIP is also going down. And this is from the gas tax swap, as they call it, from 2010, which was part of a budget deal. But the amount of funds that the state can collect is connected to the price of gasoline and the consumption of gasoline. So lower price of gasoline, people driving more efficient fuels, that means less revenue for the STIP. Last year, we had a fund estimate adopted by the CTC, which we used to develop our RTIP. And in this fund estimate, there's no new funding available. They called it essentially a zero STIP. So regions were not given their targets. Like I said before, we were given usually 10 to 15 million in the past. We got a zero. And so we had to look at just reprogramming currently programmed projects as part of the exercise. So we adopted that RTIP in November, and currently we have 3 projects programmed in our RTIP. It's not very many, but still very important projects and still a lot of money for our region. And these 3 projects are the US 101 HOV widening project, City of Galitas Equal Fowler extension project, and the State Route 246 landscaping, which is a part of our 246 passing lanes project. I'm not going to read off all these numbers, but this slide gives you the information as far as how much money is programmed to the US 101 HOV project in our RTIP and in the STIP. We were able to program $2 million back in 2014. In our 2016 STIP that we adopted last year, we moved around some funds, some prior funds from PS&E or design to right-of-way. We also have about $9 million in the San Joaquin Council of Governments RTIP, and this is per an exchange agreement that we did a few years ago. We gave them Proposition 1B funds that we were not able to use in time, and they gave us a like amount of STIP funds. And so our US 101 HOV project has $9 million in their RTIP per their agreement. Also in the 2014 STIP, the state has their own share of funds through the STIP called the Interregional Transportation Improvement Program. So they get 25% of funds, every fund estimate that they can program towards projects. And our project was fortunate enough to get $5 million in funds. And then also we have $24 million in prior funds that we're using for pre-construction work. And then we also have the Equal Fowler project. This project has $11 million programmed in our RTIP. Last year we delayed the project from fiscal year 16-17 to 17-18 per the city's request. And the project also includes state active transportation program funds and federal funds for the Hollister Bridge, which is linked to that project. And then finally, the 246 landscaping has $528,000 in fiscal year 17-18. So in January, based on analysis from the Department of Finance, the California Transportation Commission felt that it would be prudent to revise the fund estimate. The Department of Finance was noticing that due to the decline in the price of gasoline, that the price-based excise tax probably was not going to be generating as much revenue as they projected in the original fund estimate in August. So the CTC adopted a more conservative fund estimate, which is also included per the governor's budget in terms of the price-based excise tax, but it's essentially a lower rate, which is not good news. And so they developed revised scenarios to reflect the lower rates, which is leading to the shortfall in the STIP. So this graphic here is just to illustrate the problem that we're dealing with the STIP revenues. As vehicle miles grow every year and consumption decreases, then this is leading to a severe revenue loss for state transportation projects. Okay. So in January, like I said, they revised the fund estimate showing less revenues available. There's a $750 million shortfall projected. And so you have $2 billion in program projects, and you have $750 million less than you thought you did. So that means the CTC is going to have to start looking at projects for deletion statewide. And so we have not received a revised STIP guidelines for this revised fund estimate or regional targets. So we're just sort of right now reacting to the CTC and looking at how much they need to meet for a shortfall, but regions throughout the state are going through the similar process right now. So this is just a quick chart that just shows you the, right here is the millions of dollars available. These are the fiscal years and the 5-year STIP period below. The blue line shows how much money is available in the STIP period, and then the orange bar shows how much money is actually committed to projects or programmed. And so you're noticing that the and in the when we did the 2016 RTIP, when I said we had zero money available to program, they weren't letting us program any money in the last 2 years of the STIP, just because they knew that there was going to be a shortfall coming up. But these projects in the orange bars are going to now have to start cascading into the latter years, and then some projects are going to face deletion. So in January, the CTC adopted a revised fund estimate. They're looking for input from the regions by February 26th, which is next week. They're going to be holding STIP hearings in March in Sacramento and in Irvine. We are expecting the CTC staff recommendations based on input received from the regions and from Caltrans on the interregional program by April 22nd, and then they are scheduled to adopt the STIP at their May meeting. So I went over the projects that are currently programmed in our RTIP. We also wanted to note that there are 2 rail siding projects that are included in the interregional pot that Caltrans has discretion over. And these are the Seacliff siding and the Ortega siding. And this is the amount of, the Seacliff has about 8 million and the Ortega has about 12.5 million. And so these projects are also at risk of being delayed or deleted by the CTC. So I've laid out the problem, and we're looking for a solution now. And there's a lot of legislative activity going on. It's been going on for a while, but now that when you have $750 million that you have to delete, people are starting to pay more attention. So last year, the governor did start a special session on transportation, which is still moving forward. The CTC produced a letter to the legislature, the entire legislature, on the funding process, which we have included as an attachment to your board report. This past week, there was actually a special hearing held by the California Senate on just the STIP and the $750 million problem. And then throughout the state, regions are submitting letters to the legislators, just highlighting their specific projects, just to let folks know in the legislative districts of what's happening and the projects that are at risk. And currently, there are 3 funding proposals, which Mr. Gus Corey will expand upon in his presentation, but there are proposals out there which will need support of the legislature to get passed. And what they're trying to do is essentially fix the price-based excise tax. So instead of having it go down each year when gasoline goes down, they want to set it at about 18 cents and then have it adjusted to inflation. So having it 18 cents would obviously bring in more revenue and help out the state. So today, some board actions that we have are recommending that the board chair sign a letter to our legislative delegation with the letter that we've laid out highlighting our projects. SBCAG staff is not recommending any projects for deletion from our RTIP. We think that our projects are of not just of regional significance, but are, of statewide significance too. And so we are not recommending any projects for deletion. And we're also looking for any other direction that you may have for staff on board policies as we move forward in the next couple of months. And that concludes my presentation, and I can take any questions at this time.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions from directors? Yes.
Thank
Mr.
you,
White.
Madam Chair. In the reductions that are being examined, is that all, would that be across the board, basically each region or each CAG, COG gets an equal proportion of reduction, or is it, are we still just up in the air on how that process is going to go forward?
Madam Chair, Chair White, it's a little fuzzy, but we do expect that every region is going to take a hit. It's hard because different regions have different situations with how they've programmed their funds and whether they've already received an allocation from a project, but they may still have other funds that need to go to their project. So it's, but we're expecting that it's going to be throughout the state that the CTC is going to look at deletions.
Okay, thank you. What did I hear? Light.
I would just, Madam Chair, I just expand on that a little bit. We, as Sarkis said in his presentation, unlike a normal STIP process where the commission would adopt targets, funding targets for each region, and so we would program projects against a target. Normally, it's a positive number, so we would be adding projects to the STIP or programming more funding. But in this case, it's a negative number. But the CTC has not formally adopted any targets on a region-by-region basis. So we expect that the pain is going to be spread around probably to every region in the state, but the commission has not adopted any type of guidelines telling us how they expect to prioritize projects. They haven't identified any regional targets indicating how much they expect us to eliminate or recommend for deletion from our STIP. And that's one of the reasons why we're not recommending that we offer any projects up, because we don't want to be negotiating against ourselves. We don't want to offer something up and then have the commission say thank you very much and we'll take something else too. So it's really a kind of an uncertain time right at this point.
So I thank you, Mr. Kemp. I have a question for clarification, because in the attachment to our board letter, there's a listing of many of our projects, including the 3 that you are recommending. But why are you, but then you're saying we're not going to change it, that you're recommending that we don't delete any projects. But this chart shows that we are deleting, or it appears that we're deleting projects because there's 0 money allocated except for the 3 that you showed on your slide. So just clarify that for me.
And just to clarify, Madam Chair, I think you're referring to this table, which is showing our current RTIP programming.
Yes.
And the one strike through that is included is for it's just for illustration. It's the Equal Fowler Extension Project. And the reason why it's struck through is because we're just we're delaying it by 1 fiscal year in the RTIP. So we're not actually deleting a project. We're just showing that the funds are being moved by 1 year.
So why do all those other projects, they show 0 funding, but that's what I guess I'm understanding from you is that
Sure.
that's how it's always been.
The reason why those projects show 0 because they're still in our RTIP, but they have prior funds.
Okay.
And so they don't need any further STIP funding in that 5-year period.
Gotcha. All right, thank you. Any other questions? I think we have a public speaker.
Yes, Mr. Scott Wins.
Chair Wolf, members of the board, Scott Wins representing Kaiser Basic. The question here is this a problem of revenue or is this a problem of priorities? We call it a problem of priorities. Let me give you an example on the Equal Fowler thing. The city of Goleta received a petition, a very large petition by the Old Town residents and businesses a number of years back objecting to the Eckwell Fowler roundabouts. Okay? How many roundabouts are in the Eckwell Fowler? They're not ADA compliant. Yet the city of Goleta is also asking for active transportation funds. That's walking and biking. So if roundabouts are not ADA compliant and good for bicyclists, why is the city of Goleta asking for funds to promote that? How about having people go back to basics? I'm just beating up on Goleta right now because it's at the top of the list. We've got Santa Barbara over here and other issues. It's an issue of basics. The funds are there. And you start looking into the environmental issues of digging up ground and replacing with cement and so forth, the carbon list goes huge. So the people on the environmental side that are saying, well, we have to get rid of the automobile, and we have to promote active transportation, and they can't prove it. And they use false and misleading data, and boy, we really wish this would work. This is what you have to start doing. Tell staff, what are the basics? What are the basics of fixing the roads, making the streets work for transportation and businesses? And then we'll talk about the other stuff. City of Santa Barbara is facing a multi-million-dollar deficit in its street repair alone, yet it's putting in a $14 million bike path? Is that priority? If this organization and other CAGs don't start saying we have to go for priorities, basics first and then the rest later, it's never going to be fixed, and you're always going to have a deficit.
All right, thank you for that. Do we have any other public speakers?
No more public comment, no.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. Do we have any comments? Mr. Adam?
Well, I think what we should be doing is prioritizing things by anything that's shovel-ready and environmentally cleared is something we need to try and protect our investment in. But anything that's proposed or pre-EIR, pre-designed build, we need to just let that stuff go, because it's unreasonable. I mean, I don't think in the near term it would take a while to get the revenue back up. I don't think in the near term that you're going to see, and I thought your chart was interesting in that the revenues fell below zero on the chart, and maybe that was just a hyperbolic chart. It didn't have any numbers associated with it, but it went down below the bottom line, which is negative. So I don't know how that would work, but yeah, I think we need to be reasonable about what our expectations are and the expectations we're setting for ourselves and the public and our workload internally and all of that. I think we do have to prioritize. I think Mr. Wentz is right. We need to prioritize maintaining the existing infrastructure that we have and make that a much higher priority than trying to build other things, especially with respect to bike lanes and stuff. That's obviously something that I'm not a fan of. And finally, revenues need to be addressed, and I think the problem for us going forward is, and longer term, is going to get worse, because I think alternative fuels are going to be out there that are not going to be taxable, and it's going to be very difficult to maintain any kind of a consistent revenue stream that anybody can plan with. And I think that we need to move away from a fuel tax and go towards, and I hate to say this out loud because I haven't thought it through enough yet, and I haven't done enough research on it to know what it would mean. But essentially, it can't be any worse than a fuel tax to have a tire tax. And I think if we put a tax on a tire, if you don't drive, you don't pay the tax. It's not a regressive tax in that if you make less, you're going to pay it anyway, or you're chances are you're driving further than somebody else or whatever. I think it would be ultimately fair to have a tax on tires that in the event that you don't really drive, you hardly ever use up your tires, or if you have a smaller tire that takes a smaller load, then it's a lower amount of tax than a truck tire, say. So, I think it needs some more thought, but I think that's a much more it would be a much more stable revenue stream than having a fuel tax, because this fuel thing is going to change as time goes on, and I think the hydrogen is going to come on, and that's just going to eliminate your revenue stream. So I think that we should put some thought into that and see what it would take, what our needs would be, and at the same time prioritize. Because if we tell people, well, here's our great big new revenue stream, and we're going to go put bike lanes, everywhere, then people, I think, will not. There will be a lot of people that will not support that. So I think we have to be reasonable and maintain priorities and convert from a fuel tax, not have another tax in addition to the fuel tax. Convert entirely away from that and go to something else. And the tires are just an expendable item that you can allocate it via. So.
All right, thank you. So I have a few lights on, so let me know if I'm missing someone. First will be Mr. Clark, then Mr. Lavagnino, and then Mr. Richardson. Okay, and then Mr. White. All right,
Thank you,
we'll
Madam
start
Chair.
with Mr. Clark.
It's hard to argue against us developing our own priorities, but I really favor the staff recommendation. Can you imagine any other districts offering up projects? I can't. I mean, I think everybody's going to go in with a negotiating stance of, our stuff is all good and don't take it away. So I think if we put our head or our hand on the chopping block, it's going to go away. So again, I favor staff's recommendation.
All right, thank you. Mr. Clark, Mr. Lavagnino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I was going to offer up the 29 Palms project, but we already chopped it. So, but we're going to chop that one a bunch. And I hope Mr. Curry can speak to this too, because I think this does have to deal with the whole state budget. And I kind of offered up when we were talking about this at our Board of Supervisors meeting, is that the state budget's increased $50 billion over the last 5 years, and the problem we're talking about is a statewide $6 billion hole in transportation. So it is a matter of priority. It's the money at the state level is there. It's whether or not it's getting pushed into transportation. And we deal with that even on our own board of what our priorities are. And for me, I look at, and I know it's not funded through the gas tax, but the high-speed rail is a $70 billion project. And I saw a study that said to bring all roads in the state of California to best management practices is about a $68, $69 billion problem. For me, I think you put something on I think if you ask the voters, would you rather have all the roads in California at best management practices or have a high-speed rail from, that might not be so high speed? I think it's pretty obvious. So for me, this seems like a priority problem, and I hope that the state legislature gets this thing prioritized pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go on now to Mr. Richardson.
This is for Peter. On our trip to Washington last week, we received a briefing by the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, and we received a paper called The Road to Sustaining Highway Spending. And in there was an appendix that suggested options to increase current sources of highway revenues, and options for new sources of revenues. Tires was only one of those that was mentioned, and it was a doubling of the truck tire tax. But there are various suggestions. I'll ask Terry to reproduce this if you're interested in getting a copy of this, because it's something that our legislatures in the state should read and understand that there are other sources and other fair sources of revenue for highway sustainability. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll come back to you, Mr. Adam. We'll go to Mr. White now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the conversation about priorities, and there was one comment, I believe Mr. Wenz alluded to it too, and there were significant pieces of Mr. Wenz's testimony today with which I agree, which is not always the case. But certainly the city of Santa Barbara offers an example of a street system which is degrading below acceptable levels. And I know that each of us is experiencing that in some way, but that priority, that piece of having money invested in maintaining our streets needs to be bumped up as a priority, because that basic piece is suffering at the hands of all of the other activities going on. And of course, and I appreciate hearing Mr. Adam and Mr. Lavanino looking at ways to come up with other funding. I mean, that was a new tax that Mr. Adam was suggesting there. So that's a refreshing piece of testimony. So I appreciate that this board is looking at priorities, and the notion of that basic piece, keeping our streets at acceptable levels, needs to be right at the top of our list of priorities. And I appreciate the conversation going on today about that.
All right, thank you. We'll go to Supervisor Adam, and then was it Supervisor Carbajal? Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to address the truck tire tax issue. I think that's fine. You can do it. Yeah, no, I understand that. I think you should broaden that out to all tires, because and just figure out what the revenue needs to be in terms of what the gas tax used to be, and replace it through that tire tax. And it's pretty complicated, because you have to figure out how much to overlay that on each different class of tires, because there's a number of different classes of tires that bear different weights and have different loads associated with them. And so and like I said, I hate saying that before understanding what that means, but I think it's just appropriate at this time to bring it up and maybe get people thinking about it. If you put it all on the trucks, you can do that, but don't think that the trucks are just going to pay for it, because everybody pays for it through increased shipping costs. And everything you buy, everywhere you buy it almost, is shipped. So it's all going to ride the truck, and then we're all going to pay more for the stuff. So if you diffuse it more throughout the entire population, which I think is totally fair, it won't impact the shipping price of things as much as it normally would if you put it all on the trucks. But either way, entire society is going to pay for it in any event, so it really doesn't make any difference.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Carbajal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know I rarely give Mr. Adam credit, but in light of the conversation, I will say that Mr. Adam brought to our Board of Supervisors an issue that I think we could always do better in. But I'm also very proud that we responded with a substantial investment in our roads infrastructure, and we could always do more. But I want to take this opportunity, in light of Mr. White's comments and the fact that we're always looking for more federal resources and opportunities to invest in our local roads, to, I think, highlight what local jurisdictions could do, like the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors recently did with our investment, and the city of Santa Maria, with their general fund, has chosen to make their infrastructure a high priority. Santa Maria has the highest quality road index in the county of Santa Barbara. So let's not forget that it's also our decisions that what we make locally that contribute towards that. And that's why I wanted to give Mr. Adam credit, because I think he's been a champion and an advocate of that. But I also wanted to respond to my colleague, Mr. White, that it's the decisions we make in our municipalities that make all the difference. And the city of Santa Maria is a perfect example of making their roads infrastructure a priority. So congratulations, Mayor Patino.
All right, do we have anyone else? There is a light on.
Chair Wolf, and it's going to get better too. We're at 79, our CPI, and it'll be getting better in the spring.
All right, thank you. And just as a final comment, I thank you, Mr. Richardson, for bringing that information to the entire board. I think it was enlightening to hear from a bipartisan committee that had, or a panel or a group, nonprofit that had some really interesting and innovative suggestions. So I would appreciate if that does get to the entire board. Let's go to Mr. Adam, and then we'll go back to you, Mr. Richardson.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that despite whatever baby step we took towards doing the right thing, our number is going to go down to 59 this spring as yours goes up to 79, was it? 80.
We are at 79. We'll be going up this spring because we'll
Yeah.
be doing more.
Well, we're going to go down.
Well, let us always remember that, so we're here today talking about the infrastructure of our roads, but when we sit in another body, or state legislature or federal, you have to look at the human infrastructure and what is being paid for those services and what we provide to our community as well. So, we can talk about prioritizing, but I think I would hope that we would all agree, and it was good to hear from Mr. Adam, that there is a need for additional funding to do those things that we need to do for our roads and infrastructure. Okay, Mr. Richardson.
I just wanted to point out to Mr. Adam that there are other options besides tires. I'll read a couple of them. A $1 barrel for tax on oil, 3.5% surcharge to customs duty, institute a $10 driver's license surcharge, a half a cent per mile VMT fee, vehicle mile traveled fee, and replace a gas tax with a percentage tax, impose a $10 per tire tax on car tires, on and on and on. There's a whole lot of other things besides truck tires, and I understand your interest in freight, so everybody will pay on it.
That's good. Thanks for all. So there's a lot of really good ideas floating out there. Can you go back to your slide, that one where it says board actions? And I think that maybe we're at bullet 1 and 2, which is authorizing the chair to sign a letter to legislative delegation, which we have in our packet. And the other bullet is to recommend no projects for deletion. And I think it sounds like there's consensus on the board for those two. I'm not sure if there's any other direction that someone would like to make. Otherwise, I would like to have a motion at least on those first 2 bullets. Thank you. Is there a second?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just a note, there was a modified letter distributed to the board, so I assume the motion is to approve the letter as modified in the handout. Is that okay?
Madam Chair, well, just point out here briefly that the letter that was distributed in your agenda package was modified, as Mr. Dillon indicated. The substantive change was that we did add a paragraph, it's highlighted in yellow, to the letter that identifies the 2 rail siding projects. Although those projects are not funded with SB CAG's share of STIP funding, they're funded out of the Caltrans share of STIP funding. We did think that it was important, since they are projects that benefit our county, that we should at least identify them as potentially at risk for deletion from the STIP, so that we can let our legislators know that we don't want to see the projects eliminated.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kemp. Thank you for bringing that up. Mr. Dillon, will the maker of the motion just clarify that that's okay? And who seconded the motion? Okay, Mr. Clark. And that is for the first 2 bullets. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Mr. Adam?
Yeah, the only thing I want to say is if we don't recommend anything for deletion and they take something that you'd rather have, and I understand your argument, and it's a fair argument. However, do we have any of those things that are proposed pre-EIR or pre-design build that we're not going to lose anything on if we cut them?
Chair and Director Adam, the three projects that are identified in the letter and that were featured in Sarkis's staff report, the 101 HOV widening, the Fowler-Eckwell Street project, the 246 landscaping, those projects are all, they've all been environmentally cleared.
Okay.
And work is underway to one degree or another to bring the projects forward to construction. So they're not really laying there dormant at this point. I will add that, as we indicated in the staff report, that based on prior board action and also the language that was included in the Measure A investment plan, which identifies the 101 HOV project as our region's highest priority, that's we are presuming as staff that remains the board's highest priority. The board has taken numerous actions, as have the cities and the county, to adopt resolutions identifying the 101 HOV project as our highest priority. But beyond that, I think just indicating to the CTC that we don't want to see any of these projects deleted because they are active projects and they're all high priorities.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments before we vote? All right, we have a motion and a second. No further discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay. All right, item 7. Mr. Corey is ready to go.
Item 7, State Legislative Program. 7A, receive report from SBCAG State Lobbyist Gus Corey of Corey Consulting and approve state legislative platform for 2016. 7B, authorize the SBCAG chair to attend Central Coast Coalition Sacramento Lobby Day event.
All right, thank you. Mr. Hart, do you want to introduce this item? Okay. Mr. Corey, go ahead. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Madam Chair and Directors. It's always a pleasure to come down and visit the board. Sacramento's on a transportation funding diet is the way that I'll start the report. But I think given the conversation that we had on the previous item, I'd like to give a little bit of context as to why we're in this predicament to begin with, the role that you currently play, the proposals that have been introduced to try to address the shortfall, and some potentially more optimal solutions, if you will, that'll get us closer to a deal where the state will be able to chip in. So transportation currently does not receive any general fund assistance. It's totally dependent on special fund, which is the gas tax. We get the occasional assistance from a bond like Prop 1B or Prop 1A. There was the connectivity pot, which we're supposed to benefit from for intercity rail. But it's, as Mr. Kochek had stated earlier, the gas tax is predominantly based on, the revenues are based on consumption and whatever the price of gas is. Oddly enough, consumption's actually been up, according to Caltrans, but you do have more vehicle miles traveled because vehicles are more fuel efficient. The problem is when you go from $4 gas to $2 gas to sub $2 gas in some jurisdictions, you can't collect enough to keep up with the priorities that have been identified by the state and by the local jurisdictions. So Proposition 1B was a very successful program, but again, it was one-time funding, it was a bond program, and it's expired, it's matured, if you will. And that was back in 2006 is when it was approved, and so it's been a decade. And what happened in the interim between then and now is that under the Schwarzenegger administration, we obviously had some yawning deficits. And so there were some hard decisions that had to be made. For the Democrats, they'll tell you the priority was to try and keep education and health and human services whole. So unfortunately, transportation just wasn't as high of a priority. For the Schwarzenegger administration, they had to also look at what do we do about our bond debt service obligations. So while something like a Proposition 1B was passed as a general obligation bond, meaning that the general fund had to pay for the debt service, they did the fancy gas tax swap to find some relief to have transportation revenue pay for transportation bond debt service, which was never the intention. And so essentially what was supplemental funding became our sole source of funding, and we would be in much bigger trouble had we not had Proposition 1B. So what's kind of kept the system afloat, if you will, are people such as yourselves. We're fortunate to be one of 20 counties in the state that have a local sales tax measure. The 20 counties generate about $4 billion annually in sales tax measures. We represent 80% of the population. There's a couple problems with this, though. Santa Barbara County only has about 450,000 inhabitants, correct me if I'm wrong on that. And so how many times are we going to tax ourselves, number one, to take care of the state's asset? Because you're essentially making an investment on the state's asset. And so that's number one. Number two, there's a saturation point. How much do you want your residents to pay for the state's asset? That's a second concern. So the governor, as Mr. Kotchik had mentioned, had introduced a special session. He convened a special session last June to take a harder look at the dire situation. The governor says that there's approximately a $6 billion deficit in just taking care of our existing rehab and maintenance needs. So the proposals that you have, and they're in your packet, and with all due respect to the Republican caucus, they have, the three that I have are a little bit more comprehensive than some of the ones that have been introduced, but these are easier ones to digest as well. And so, long story short, I think on the three proposals, and I'm happy to answer any questions, I just don't want to get too much into the weeds for you, but essentially the governor has a proposal to provide $3.6 billion per year. Well, it's $3.6 billion of funding, but the problem is $6 billion. And so some have said, why would you only put out half a fire? You have Senator Bell that's coming up with a proposal.
Excuse me, Mr. Quarry. Supervisor Adam has a question.
Well, that's actually pretty good, because what we do at the county is we're told that we need $12 million a year, and we basically give them $4 million. So they're actually doing pretty good. So we should be thankful.
Well, they're trying, and so Senator Bell's proposal and Assemblymember Frazier's proposal are higher than that, but the sources that they rely upon are flawed, given much of the comments that you made, Director Adam, which is we can't really rely on the gas tax. It's an arcane mechanism that dates back to the 1920s. The last time we had a gas tax increase was 1994. It was never adjusted for inflation. So the purchasing power of that resource is the equivalent of 1930s dollars, if you will. You can't fund today's infrastructure using that mechanism. And then, again, we're subject to the volatility.
Excuse me, Supervisor Adam?
Well, the other thing that changed in that is the advent of cars that get 40 miles a gallon, too.
Absolutely.
You know, I mean, that's a totally different animal than it was back in those days. If you probably got 10, you were really doing well. So, yeah, everything's changed, and it's all out of kilter for a variety of reasons.
You're absolutely right. And you highlighted another concern, which is the movement towards alternative fuels. So Governor Brown has a strong desire to wean us of our dependence on petroleum. There was even a bill during the last session, SB 350, which was carried by the Senate President Pro Tem, and it would have reduced our dependence on petroleum by 50% by the year 2030. Had that bill enacted to still include the provision for petroleum, it included it articulated other alternative fuels, but they deleted out the provisions dealing with petroleum. It would have further eviscerated, it would have caused a bigger crater in the for transportation funding as a result. And so again, I think the writing's on the wall for the gas tax, yet it is a component of the three proposals that I highlighted in the packet. In addition, another plank, if you will, is relying on a vehicle registration fee. In my estimation, currently, alternative vehicles do not pay a registration fee, and so the legislature's trying to remedy that situation. In my estimation, it's going to be similar to what the excise tax is, which is it's a flat fee. So we have to have something a little bit more dynamic. Cap and trade funding is another component in at least 2 of the proposals. If the legislature doesn't hurry up and strike a deal, though, we're in jeopardy of losing that as a potential funding source, and I'll tell you why. When the legislature approved cap and trade 2 years ago, the legislation was approved on a majority vote of the legislature. The Chamber of Commerce is currently litigating the validity of that vote, essentially, because in their estimation, it violates Proposition 26, which says that if you're going to pass a tax or a fee, and in their estimation it's a tax, because the fee has to have a direct benefit to the payor, it needs to be passed with a 2/3 vote of the legislature. Now, this is about $3 billion worth of revenue that we're talking about, and so there's a concern where if the legislature does not pass the package, that not only would future allocations halt, but we might have to repay back the allocations that were previously made. And so the governor is holding on to the allocations, hoping that there's a deal to be had, a bipartisan deal to be had, that has this as a component. So those are the problems with the 3 major proposals that are currently out there. What's missing, to go back to the STIP, is that, again, you're doing the hard work of taxing your own constituents to fund the state's assets. There needs to be assistance. The STIP program, the beauty of the STIP is that it's flexible. You can use it for whatever, basically for just about any purpose that you want. If you want to augment funding for local streets and roads, if you do want to spend it on bike and pedestrian, you can. If you want to spend it on rail, you can. If you want to do a congestion relief or safety project on the state highway system, the 101, which is a priority for us, you can do that. And so, in my estimation, I think it's not prudent for the state to not give you the resources and leverage your dollars to allow you to deliver on some of these projects that would improve the quality of life for people. I testified at that Senate Transportation and Housing Committee meeting, and with all due respect, I understand, and you wear several hats. Should we fund local streets and roads? Absolutely. Should we maintain our current infrastructure? Absolutely. Should Caltrans have resources to maintain the state highway system? Absolutely. But I would argue it's not so cookie cutter for most. It depends on where you live. If you're in the Bay Area, Los Angeles, in rural areas within a county, the conversation sometimes isn't, geez, Main Street was really bumpy. It's, you know what, I'm sorry that I'm late, but there was a lot of congestion on the 101. So I think that message is starting to resonate with several of the legislators, and I got a lot of nodding heads. I think a more prudent solution, instead of nickel and diming people and relying on these 3 disparate funding sources, is to do something that's going to be more predictable and reliable. And I kind of like where Director Adam was going. What I would commend, I know it's not popular to most, but one thing that the state did that's coming back to haunt us too is getting rid of the vehicle license fee. We went from a 2% valuation down to a 0.65 valuation. The result is about a $6 billion hole that should have went to the general fund. The beauty of the vehicle license fee is that it's based on your vehicle registration. Everyone has a car, so it doesn't matter what powers your vehicle, number one. It doesn't matter how far you drive. And I would argue a VMT is probably not the best thing for people in rural areas. You're punishing people for having to drive farther, and they may be of lesser means. Another component is that it's federally tax deductible. A third component is that you can calibrate it to where you can say, if your car is $5,000 or less, we're not going to increase your fee as a result. That would give us more stable, predictable funding. If you coupled that with cap and trade and with the restoration of commercial truck weight fees, which the legislature took again because it wasn't constitutionally protected, you're talking about $10 billion a year. And then you would have the resources to leverage your measure dollars in order to deliver on these projects. But you would get to decide what your priorities are instead of being put into a situation where we're basically delaying the inevitable, folks. I mean, the decision that the CTC is asking you to make isn't really fair because they're just looking at it from this fiscal year. So even if we deferred a project into the next fiscal year, you're going to have to make another decision. You're backed into a corner. The legislature is going to have to step up and do something. So as far as timing goes, the hope is that we can have something put together by the time that the legislature submits a budget to the governor, and that's by the constitutional date of June 15th. So the legislature is working. We're hoping within the next 3 months that we can agree to a deal, because what's pending is the Board of Equalization is looking at the gas tax revenues, and they have to make an additional adjustment. So we were at 18 cents, we're down to 12 cents, and they're talking about going down to 10 cents, which, again, it's just an arcane mechanism to rely upon, and it's a hard choice to make, but it's not any different from hard choices that legislators have had to make before, whether it's water, education, and so forth. So with that context, I think I'll pass it over to Mr. Hart to talk about our state legislative program.
Mr. Hart?
This year's state legislative program just basically has been refined to address the more current programs that are in existence since last year. For example, under issue number 1, protecting existing sources of transportation funding, we've added monitoring the work of the Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee, which was assembled by the California Transportation Commission in order to study the implementation of a mileage-based user fee as an alternative solution or replacement source to the gas tax. This is the mechanism that you've been talking about. This is one of the tools that the state's considering looking at as a way to address this funding shortfall and potentially replace the gas tax. There's actually a pilot program underway where they're asking 5,000 California residents to have technology installed in their cars to monitor their driving, to see if there are different technological ways to look at collecting the data that they would need to move to a different mechanism for replacing the gas tax. Number 3, augmenting transportation funding sources. This includes language at the end that talks about the Active Transportation Program, which is a new program since our last legislative update, and also talks specifically about the governor's proposal and allows us to have the ability to engage specifically on these legislative programs that are in front of the legislature as we're talking now. And in addition, under 4, supporting increased transit funding and operational improvements, there's additional language in there as well at the end that talks about the Low Carbon Transit Operations Program and the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Programs within Cap and Trade. These are new programs that we want to have the flexibility in our legislative program to be able to engage the legislature if these issues impact SBCAG's priorities. Those are the only changes to the ledge program, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have.
Okay, thank you. Do we have questions from board members for either Mr. Quarry or Mr. Hart? I do have one question. I had read somewhere that there is an initiative that's coming forward to the voters that has to do with the high-speed rail, and instead of utilizing the funds for high-speed rail, to divert them for water projects. What's the status of that?
I'm not sure if that's yet qualified, but I do understand that there is a process for signature gathering at this point. It's something that I'll definitely monitor. And the reason why that's necessary is because Proposition 1A was passed by a vote of the people. So in order to redirect any of the funds, you have to go back out to the voters in order to amend that.
So it's not going back for, I mean, the way it sounds like this is written is that it's not going back into the pot for roads and infrastructure, but rather into programs for water.
I think that's what the proponents
Right.
want, and that's independent of the legislative
Gotcha.
process. But it's a legacy item for the governor, so we would be hard pressed to see any movement on that that would be successful.
Okay. Any other questions? Do we have any public speakers?
We have no public comment.
Okay.
Madam
Then
Chair?
let's-
Sorry,
Yes,
one more. I think there was one more item, which was, I think, B, and that was authorizing the chair to attend the
I thought we
Central
could just
Coast.
skip that one.
You're going to come to lovely Sacramento, hopefully on March 9th, to join our colleagues in the Central Coast Coalition. I've arranged some meetings with the proponents of the legislation before you, basically the chairs of the Senate and Assembly Transportation Committee, Secretary Brian Kelly for the California State Transportation Agency, our legislative delegation, as well as the coalition's delegation, among others, to talk about these very issues and hope that we can provoke them to strike a deal. And so we'll be very pleased to have the chairman and SBCAG staff attend on the 9th.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Okay, yes, Mr. Richardson, and who else down here? And then Mr. Adam.
I'd like to recommend that you take that trip to the Legislative Day, because it was very informative last year and very well done by Mr. Corey, and I would encourage you to attend.
Yes, I'm ready to roll.
And I would hope that the board agrees with that, too.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Mr. Adam?
Well, I am so opposed to this vehicle mileage tax and the intrusive nature into our lives that it represents, that I really want to make a motion that we oppose the vehicle mileage tax in our state legislative platform.
What, in our platform, just so we're clear, is that, which number is that, Mr. Adam?
Well, I don't know.
I don't think actually the program advocates for it. I think the language specifically is to monitor the work of the Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee.
Well,
and the point being so that we can pay attention to what it is that they're proposing.
Okay, well, I just made a motion. It's not uncommon for me not to be able to get a second, so I'm not going to be surprised if that happens. But, you know, we're talking about the legislative platform. Thank you. You know,
It's just that it's not in the platform.
It's not there, and so the thing is I want to put it there because I think it's the right thing to do.
Okay, did you want to say something, Mr. Kemp?
Well, Chair and Director Adam, just to clarify, where things stand right now with the state's road user charge technical committee that's working on this idea of finding a replacement for the gas tax. There's uniform agreement that the gas tax is broken, and so we need to find something to replace it. And what they're attempting to do is to test different methods of collecting a road user charge. One of them might be some type of a vehicle miles traveled fee that would require monitoring how much people travel and having those people pay based on the amount of mileage that they travel instead of paying for a gas tax. Another option would be to simply allow folks to choose to pay an annual fee in lieu of their gas tax that's based on an assumed amount of travel that they're going to do. So you don't have the invasive kind of privacy issues that you would have with monitoring how much people drive. People would just simply pay a monthly fee or a quarterly fee based on an assumption of how much they're going to drive instead of paying a gas tax. So there are different ways to approach collecting a user charge that are more have more efficacy than the gas tax does. So I think it is something that's being studied. It's a long-term solution. I don't think that anything is going to happen in the next legislative session or in the near term that we would have to worry about, and we'll certainly keep the board up to speed on what's happening with this pilot program.
Well, that may be, but as Mr. Curry goes about his work representing us, if we have a vote on this and it passes, then he'll be able to let everybody know that SBCAG is not in favor of a vehicle mileage tax.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Let's do a roll call vote, please.
Directors Carbajal? No. Farr? Oh, sorry. Adam? Aye. Lebanino? No. Bennett?
No.
Richardson? No. Lizaldi? No. Mosby? No. Clark? Aye. White? No. Patino? Aye. Sierra? No. And Chair Wolf?
No.
Motion fails 9-3.
Okay. Can we have another motion? And we had recommendation. All right, and that was items A and B. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Would you like a roll call vote? Okay, let's, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, and we'll see you in Sacramento. You have one more thing to say?
Just one more comment, and staff's probably going to kill me for saying this, but I want to commend.
Or we may.
Or you guys may, yeah. I want to commend your staff and District 5 for working collaboratively in order to get the $60 million award for Phase 3 of the 101. Given just how tight it's been to get money from Sacramento, that was a very big get. And it's in no small part to the great work that Mr. Kochek does as RTPA moderator, and the great staff work that both Mr. Kemp and Vandenberg and Hart do in wearing different hats, working through CalCog. They've really elevated the conversation with the STIP through CalCog, and CalCog did testify for the need for STIP dollars too. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you so much.
You know, thank you very much for bringing that up. I'm not sure that we thanked our staff for all of the work that they did to get us a significant amount of money. $60 million for our project is huge. And, you know, we were all holding our breath waiting, and we didn't have that information at our last meeting. I think it happened that afternoon. So to everyone who was involved to get us that, you know, that's what we talk about all the time, and we were successful, and it's in no small part to our staff, and for whatever part that Caltrans played in that, we also appreciate it. So thank you for bringing that up.
Of course. Thank you very much.
All right, now we'll move on to information items. First is, do we need to read this? Can I just say it, or?
Actually, it's the Executive Director's report.
Right, okay.
Chair and members, you'll recall a year ago, or almost a year ago, that the Undersecretary for the California State Transportation Agency, Chad Edison, and Jennifer Bergner from the LOSAN, the Los Angeles, San Diego, San Luis Obispo Rail Corridor, JPA, attended the board meeting to talk about the work that's being done by the LOSAN JPA, the recently formed JPA, and in particular to talk about our efforts and our proposal to retime the Pacific Surfliner service so that it better serves commuters that are traveling from Ventura County to the South Coast to their jobs. We've asked, and both Chad and Jennifer have agreed to attend the March 17th board meeting to provide us with an update on the status of the retiming proposal. There is work that is underway. There is more work that needs to be done, including securing the agreement, concurrence with the Metrolink, who operates the trains from Ventura County down to Los Angeles, as well as our friends at Union Pacific. So they will be attending the meeting. They've agreed to attend the meeting on March 17th to provide us with an update on LOSAN and our retiming efforts. The Highway 246 passing lanes project, I just wanted to note that project has been placed on a winter suspension, even though we haven't been getting a lot of rain. The contractor has asked that the project be put on winter suspension for erosion control purposes, and also, I believe, for paving purposes. The temperatures need to be sustained at a high enough level for paving to take place. So the project has been put on a temporary suspension. And then finally, our delegation did go back to Washington, D.C., the delegation consisting of Directors Wolf, Bennett, and Richardson. Last week, we met over the course of 2 days, had I think 10 meetings with members of Congress, the staff, committee staff, as well as members of the Federal Department of Transportation staff. It was a busy 2 days full of meetings. This trip was substantially different than it has been in the past, primarily because of the fact that the federal government, Congress, enacted the new Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act, or FAST Act, which authorizes transportation funding for the next 5 years. So Congress finally passed a multi-year transportation bill that authorizes funding for surface transportation and sets in place those programs that we've come to rely on. One of the issues that we talked about in several of the meetings was the fact that despite Congress's action to fund this FAST Act at a level that is slightly higher than the old MAP 21 Act that it replaced, Congress did not tackle the problem that exists at the state level, which is the federal gas tax is broken as well. The Highway Trust Fund is essentially going to be insolvent because the revenues that are coming in from the federal gas tax are not sufficient to sustain the programs that have been authorized by Congress. Congress got around this by putting in one-time general fund revenues that provide a substantial amount of the roughly $300 billion that are going to be that are authorized under the FAST Act. And we're concerned what's going to happen at the end of the 5 years when we're once again facing an even larger deficit, and we have no action on the inadequacy of the federal gas tax. The other issue, of course, that we brought up in I think just about every one of the meetings that was presented by the chair was that we are a self-help county, and we did elect to tax our citizens, or they elected to tax themselves by an overwhelming majority, and that makes us different. We stand out in Washington, D.C., even though there are a lot of counties in California that have local sales tax measures. It's not common across the country, or as common across the country, and I think that that's something that does resonate with the folks in Washington, D.C. So we made sure to make mention of that. And then finally, we did talk with the DOT staff about a new program. There aren't a lot of new programs under the FAST Act, but there is a new national discretionary freight program that provides the potential for funding goods movement projects throughout the state. It's going to be operated somewhat similar to the Tiger program that the board members are familiar with, where we go through an annual application process. And we made sure to talk about, or to assure our eligibility with the DOT staff for that national discretionary program, so that we can compete for those dollars. And I think that they're still forming their thoughts on how they're going to operate the program, but I think it was timely for us to be there at a time when they haven't put everything down in writing. So I think it was a good trip for us, and we expect to have a full report, a written report that we'll distribute to the board members next month from Don Gilchrist, our lobbyist in DC, who will provide more details on the meetings that we had. But I just want to provide a quick update, and if there are any items that I missed, I would look to the members who attended. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Mr. Richardson, and then Mr. Carbajal.
I want to reassure the board that this trip and the one last year that I attended were successful. Mr. Hart and Mr. Kemp made a great presentation to each of the committees and people that we talked with. It was a coordinated presentation. Our chair also made a great presentation. I want to reassure the board that these trips are important and vital to Santa Barbara County, and to endorse the next trip for next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Carbajal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Kemp, you briefly touched on the update that Jennifer Bergner of LoSan would be providing the board in the future. I'm not sure if you addressed the issue of, I think we had talked about the possibility of doing what we did last time and changing the schedule of the meeting so it would be a South County meeting and make it more convenient for them.
That's correct. I did not. That would be at the pleasure of the board.
Yeah.
Last year we had the meeting in March, but the original, according to the schedule adopted by the board, the meeting was scheduled for Santa Maria, but in order to make it somewhat more convenient for them, since they're traveling, the board elected to swap I believe it was the March and the April meetings, and hold the March meeting in Santa Barbara, the April meeting in Santa Maria. And that's something the board could direct staff to do.
So I just wanted to raise that to us, Madam Chair, if that's something the board might be willing to do.
Yeah, thank you for that, Supervisor. Mr. Dillon, can we just give direction?
Just another logistical issue is that APCD would be noticed right now for the regular meeting in Santa Maria for next month. So we'd have to deal with that as well. And then it's too late to change your schedule of meetings, so you'd have to basically cancel your regular meeting and set a special meeting. I think would be the only, it's very doable. I don't mean to suggest that you can't do that, but that would be the process for doing it. And you'd give direction to your director to do that if you want to do that.
Madam Chair, I'd like to suggest that. I don't know if there's any objections to it, but it tends to work well for them since they travel up from Los Angeles. And
Okay, and Mr. Adam, are you chair of APCD? Might that be something that you could work out too, is to change the meeting?
Change the APCD, yeah, I guess.
And then just have it in line with SBCAG?
What's the date that you need that?
March 17th is the date we're talking about. Yeah, the meetings are back-to-back. The SBCAG board meeting is in the morning, and then the APCD meets in the afternoon. And APCD, I believe, is currently noticed a meeting in Santa Maria.
Madam Chair, I'm also concerned your clerk is advising there might be a meeting already scheduled here that day for another body of some sort.
I think there is. I think it's a meeting that's been scheduled for a while, because we'd have to do public comment in the planning commission, is what I was informed. But I'll double check with the CEO's office.
What's the date you want to change it to?
Was it what was the day?
March 17th, St. Patty's Day.
Is this something that we can do after this meeting to see if all of these things line up? And then
You could defer to the chairs to decide whether or not to move the meeting, because each of you have the authority to call the special meeting and cancel a regular meeting, if you want to keep it under consideration. We won't be able to get back to the board for a decision after today, so you could approach it that way.
I already have it on the 17th.
But it would just be a change of location.
Yeah.
Oh, location.
From Santa Maria to
Okay,
here.
well, I don't have do we have an APCD that day?
Yes,
Yeah.
we do.
We do? Okay, well, that's not on my calendar, so if my staff's listening,
How about if we,
might
if
wanna
we
put
take
that
that
on
under consideration, I'll work with Mr. Adam and also with Ms. Contreras about the availability of this room. If the room's not available, then we just may have to keep I think that will be our first step, is finding that out. If that doesn't work, then we're just going to have to keep things as they are. Okay. All right. Do we need a motion?
But you're basically deferring to the chairs to work it out, and if possible, move the meeting to the South County. Sounds like
I'll just move to ask the chairs if they would give consideration to working out the swapping of the dates so that we could accommodate the LoSAN staff that are visiting. And
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that passes. Do we have any other comments about Mr. Kemp's report? Mr. Kemp, did you want to say one
I'm
last
sorry, I
thing?
overlooked one item. We did, our staff did check on the question that was brought up by Director White regarding the 29 Palms, regarding the City of Santa Barbara project.
The signals. That's
The
going to go down in history.
project.
you guys are obsessed with that 29 Palms.
We
thing.
want their money. Yeah, the three intersections that were identified in the project listing in Appendix A, which are Carpinteria Street at Voluntario, Alamar Avenue at Puesta del Sol, and La Cumbre Road at Cayecita. We checked with the city staff, and they indicated that the projects involve curb extensions and flashing beacons being installed. So I think that answers the question.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, that's good. Thank you for that. All right. Is Terry there? All right, we'll do the next item, Mr. Dillon.
The next item, Madam
Number
Chair,
9.
I believe is the report from Caltrans.
Mr. Govins?
Okay. Thank you, Chair, Directors. I will have a short report today. It seems most of my items were brought up in some of your items. First thing, I just wanted to reflect again on the Linden Casitas project. Again, Caltrans had delivered the design, all the permitting, both through the city and other agencies and the right-of-way, and working closely with your staff, made sure that CTC understood how this project would meet all their allocation priorities and how important it was. So we're very happy that shortly after the last meeting, we received that allocation. So we look forward, moving forward on that, keeping the community involved, and all that entails. The other item I would like to bring up, Caltrans is starting work on our statewide California State Rail Plan. And again, this is both the passenger rail as well as our freight plan, because a lot of the freight moves on rails as well. We will be working on that, and to make sure that we are taking in the public priorities at the beginning, in the month of March, we'll announce a survey where people can participate, give us some of their priorities. We'll have a set of questions. We'll relay that down through staff to this board so that you all know where that's available and how to give input to that. And with that, I believe all my others had been covered, and I would be happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
Any questions? I actually want to follow up with Mr. Kemp, because when you mentioned rail, Mr. Gubbins, it brought to mind an issue that we had talked about, and Supervisor Carbajal, we had talked about the safety of some of the undercrossings in the, for pedestrians. So is that, do we need to discuss this with Caltrans, or is it something that we can do on our own?
Madam Chair, I think the issue you're referring to is concerns that had come up specifically related to the pedestrian crossing at Butterfly Lane in Montecito. There's a lot of heavy pedestrian traffic that crosses the railroad tracks there to access the beach. And I've been in contact with Scott McAlpin, the County Public Works Director. There's a few things that are in the works. One of the things we're looking at is the possibility of putting up some more robust signage at the crossings. Right now, it's just the standard crossbuck, the X saying railroad crossing, and it's the approach to on both sides is very close to the railroad tracks. And it's in a kind of protected area, and it's noisy, so you can't hear trains approaching. So I think Scott has talked to the city public works staff and is looking at the possibility of seeing if we can do some enhanced signage for people that are crossing there. The other thing that we're looking at is working with Operation Lifesaver, which is an existing program that comes into communities that have at-grade railroad crossings, or where there's frequent accidents or encroachments on the railroad property, to just work on educating the community about safety around railroad crossings and railroad properties. We have a large area of railroad tracks that are not protected by fencing, and we do have a lot of people that are walking either on or near the railroad tracks. And so my staff is working on trying to coordinate something with Operation Lifesaver to have some type of event or events in our area.
Okay, well, thank you for that, and if you could just keep us updated, that would be great.
Will do.
Thank you for your information. Mr. Carbajal?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for raising that issue, and I thank Mr. Kemp and staff for following up on that. Mr. Gubbins, there was an item that I forwarded to you. A number of my constituents in the Montecito area have continued to raise. This has been an ongoing issue for years. The exploration of some kind of measures that would increase safety on 192 near the library area.
Right.
And I'm just wondering what you're doing to follow up with them on that.
Right. I received that information from you this week, and I've followed up with my staff. They'll be going out to look at it again. There is a signalized intersection approximately 300 feet away that does have striped crosswalks. I understand that's not as convenient, but we will look at that and see if there can be signage, maybe directing people to that. I mean, that we have concerns, as you know, on a wide variety of places on 192. We've tried to be responsive. I know we've met with your staff and constituents out in the field on at least 2 or 3 occasions just these last few months. But on that one, I've instructed staff this week to go back, take yet another look at it, and reply to constituents so that they know that we're doing that.
Right.
And just to make sure that, A, what can we do, if anything, and we were looking at a sign package of just some, pedestrians ahead. If we can't put a crosswalk in, at least letting drivers be aware of it. But we need to finalize that, and I will say, we do need to get that feedback so that they know it's not just falling on deaf ears.
Great. I would encourage you to work with the Montecito Association, because I know that sometimes safety measures and the options available don't coincide with the community plan desires of keeping it rural and not intrusive lights and all those issues. So work with them to maybe show the contradiction that exists in trying to address the safety issue with a number of options and the community plan conflicts, because I think that's an issue the community has to understand and has to grapple with in coming to terms with at what price is safety more important than certain aesthetic or vice versa. And that's a value judgment the community needs to make.
I appreciate that, and that's why I was very appreciative of the last meeting that was had. We had members from County Public Works and Planning, as well as the Montecito Planning Group, so that they could all weigh that exact thing. So thank you.
Okay, very good. Any other questions or comments? All right, let's go to item 10, committee meeting reports. LoSAN board meeting. Mr. Carbajal, did you have anything to report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yesterday, we had our LoSAN meeting, and the items that were covered were the impasse that has been reached between LoSAN and the MetroLink Authority regarding the rail-to-rail program, which is basically an agreement between the two agencies to create a seamless fare and pass that you could use on both MetroLink locomotives as well as the Surfliner. And that's been ongoing, and unfortunately, there's an impasse, and LoSAN has moved to initiate a suspension of the program unless an agreement could be reached. So I think negotiations are going to continue. We also reviewed our business plan again and the budget associated with that. We had also, like today, a legislative report to our LoSAN board. And lastly, we continue to discuss the board of directors initiatives for 2016. And Mr. Kemp, I think it would be a good idea to just get those initiatives and some of this information that I'm touching on to the board as an FYI, rather than just, one big hearing a year that they get sort of up to speed. I think it would be important for them to get some of these reports that we're getting at LoSAN, other than me giving a very brief update. So they have a better understanding of the issues involved with this authority that we are part of.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor, for your report and for being there. The next item, we have communications. It's listed in our agenda. I don't think we need to go through that. I would just say on the advanced calendar, just a reminder, based on today's meeting, was to bring back the letter that we want to write to Caltrans about 101. Does anyone have any comment on item 11, communications?
Yes, I'd like to remind the mayors and their representatives that there's a city selection meeting in the boardroom next door to us at the conclusion of this meeting.
Oh, good, okay. Anything else? Does staff want to say anything about communications? All right, then
Madam Chair?
Oh, Mr. Dillon?
This might fit under communications. We checked on the availability of the room next month, and it's booked for the State Water Board all day.
Oh,
So it
all right, well,
looks to
then.
be unlikely. We could check it further just to confirm, but it looks unlikely, unfortunately.
Okay, so we will follow the motion that was made, and then, but it sounds like everything we will continue to meet in Santa Maria, but, okay. All right, does anyone else have anything to say? Looks like a finger was on the, want to say something?
I had my light on, but you didn't notice again.
Did not.
Yeah.
Do you want to say something now?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right, we are at adjournment. I am moving to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Lavagnino. Meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everyone.